Lots of
Welcome to the Interschool Council's Hot Topic on the state of the district in Lower Merion. I'm Allison Crawford, and along with Cheryl Masterman, we are the co-presidents of the Interschool Council. The ISC is a parent, guardian, volunteer organization that connects the 11 home and school associations in the district. Among other things, we host the Hot Topic in conjunction with the Lower Merion School District every second Tuesday of the month. This is our final Hot Topic for the 22-23 school year, and we are already planning for next year and have lots of ideas. If any of you have suggestions, feel free to send them directly to me and Cheryl, or to put them in the chat directly to us. Our presenter today is Megan Shafer, our acting superintendent of Lower Merion School District. We're very grateful you're here after a school board meeting last night, and looking forward to hearing about the accomplishments of the school district in this very eventful year that hasn't quite ended, and ongoing work and priorities for next year. You will all have the opportunity to ask questions using the raise hand function at the end of Megan's presentation. We will attempt to call on you in the order that the raised hand goes up. Please keep your questions general and do not mention names, because this presentation will be recorded and added to the ISC's YouTube channel. And now I will turn it over to you, Ms. Megan Shafer. Thank you.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. It's nice to see you this morning, and I'm looking forward to presenting an overview of sort of the year to date, and then some thoughts about the work ahead in sort of from my lens of serving as the acting superintendent in this moment, and also like to acknowledge my team members that are here today, and ask them to feel free to jump in and share any other thoughts or expand on any of the items I'm presenting. And largely, I think what you'll hear today is if you've been around some of the meetings, some of this is repeating other things that we presented over the year, but again, maybe some reflections and the vision for the work ahead. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Hopefully. Is that successful? Great.
yes.
All right. So one of the things that I will sort of, you'll see as a repeating theme throughout this presentation is, a lot has happened in a short period of time when you think about where we are in 2023 and where we were in 2020. And I'm going to go through a lot of this as sort of independent concepts, but together you can just see an array of challenges and also opportunities that I think set the stage for us to grow, to have learned from, and to be better positioned to deliver high quality instruction for students now and into the future. And so, that was the other thing that happened. I ended up in this role, which was not necessarily part of the plan coming into the 22-23 school year. But in addition to all of these other transitions, obviously leadership transitions do have an impact on a school system and ways that we, again, acknowledging the team that's here today and the team that isn't here today, and how staff and the support that I've received in this short period of time was certainly meaningful and couldn't have been done without them. So let's see if I can advance here. One of the phrases that I stole from Shawana is we're going to talk about glowing and growing. And part of this is acknowledge some of the successes and then some of the areas that we can continue to grow. And this is the agenda. I'm going to run through these topics and again, probably things that you expected to hear about. And I'll start with the pandemic and the idea that the pandemic is over and we're back to normal. I know that people don't feel that way, but I think it's important to call attention to the idea that we're still in a recovery phase. I was going back in my notes and we were still, I mean, and to some degree, we're still in a responsive mode, but just a year ago, actually May 13th of 2022, I was providing a health and safety update to the board, still talking about community levels of spread, talking about mitigation measures. So that wasn't even quite a year ago, almost by a few days, that we were still, that was still a very standing topic of discussion. So when you think about what does that mean, just from an operational standpoint, the time that's allocated to addressing COVID means that there's less room and less time to address other things, right? In terms of systems and approaches and other transitions. So I want to acknowledge that just from a systems operation standpoint, but also the real impact of that. And when you think about crisis management, we've used this framework, and we use this framework within the district in terms of thinking about the way in which we respond to crisis. And a pandemic is a crisis, and what's every crisis is unique in its own way, but certainly one of the features of the COVID crisis is its duration. And the research tells us that sometimes the longer the duration, usually the longer the recovery period. And so thinking about it through that lens, we're definitely still within that recovery period, not just from that operational standpoint, but there was a lot of loss, loss of relationships, loss of life. And, I think we're still, at an individual level and at a systems level, feeling that and processing that in a recovery, from like a recovery stance. So I say that because I think it just helps put some perspective on the need to acknowledge that minimally. The other thing that also I think is more of a glow moment is our work, keeping in mind the foundational nature of our diversity, equity, inclusivity, and belonging work. And for this year, one of the highlights, I think organizationally and for me personally, is Shawana James Coles joining the organization. Dr. Merion was very intentional about where the position sits organizationally speaking. And I know that may be hard to read, but I've used this slide before to show that that director of DEIB position is a member of cabinet. As a member of cabinet, you sort of enjoy the ability to be in any space and partner across the board to ensure that you have a role, a voice, and a lens into the work, which I think is critical, certainly for this position. So I think this is truly a benefit to the organization to have a position like this and at the level that we do here. And I think, and Shawana, I think would still speak to this, is navigating the district, getting to know the district, establishing relationships is really important. We've talked about this in a few venues recently about sometimes it's not about the facts, it's about the relationships. So ensuring that, especially with this work, that we have we recognize the time it takes to build those important and effective relationships. And I've used this statement from the nonprofit association of Oregon, which is the urgency behind this work. The work is urgent, and we will always be learning. So I think from that framework, it's I think a healthy place to talk about the work. So we're all on our journey of learning how to do this work better every day, and we're going to make mistakes, and that's part of as we tell students, like that's part of the learning journey, is that we make some mistakes along the way, but we don't stop trying. So that's how it started this year. And I see Shawana's joined
I was
us.
having some technical difficulties, so I'm on the computer right now.
Well, welcome. So I just got to your part. You don't even know so the celebration of, so right away, one of the things that, and I think it's important to have fun too in the work. We have to have some joy. We have to express that, I think. And one of the bright spots for me was doing some of this work with Shawana, the DEIB dance party, and trying to make meaning of terms that sometimes get misunderstood or are complex or scary to some people. So we had some fun with this early on in the school year, and did some work with our administrators around this idea of the DEIB dance party. And again, trying to build common understandings. And then I'd say, how is it going? How it's going is amazing. The work that Shawana and Amy and others who have partnered, the DEI liaisons at the building level, branding the work so we see it, we know what it means. The videos, the vignettes that Shawana and Amy have worked on, again, to be building that understanding around this work is critical. We have student voice now that we shared out at the Equity and Anti-Racism Committee meeting. And again, also a more hopefully recognizable platform for reporting concerns. One that goes through the office where Shawana and I occasionally are used to sit, and we'll sit again. So that there's an understanding that these aren't just building-based issues, that the district has eyes and ears on issues of concern that are raised through that process. And then I think I wanted to call attention to the website where there's another wealth of resources around the work that's been done in the ongoing work. Shawana, did you want to add anything? I don't mean to put you on the spot there.
No, I appreciate you sharing. It's been a wonderful journey, and just connecting with people on this work, and even with the DEI liaisons. We're engaged in a book study on belonging with Cobb and Crown Apple, and I know that some of you probably saw the presentation last night, and we'll dig into the reports that were provided and see how we can continue this work. I do know that there is a lot of professional development that's going on, and it depends on sometimes what building needs. And we are working, we have someone coming in tomorrow to help us connect the dots with our administrators on, some of the things that's going on with PBIS and UDL, it's all these acronyms, and how do all these things align with our equity work. And so this is just the foundation, and we're going to move forward. I will say that I don't call them, sometimes we say we have mistakes along the way, but I look at them and as growth opportunities, because if you look at them as growth opportunities, then you look at, you learn from it and you move on, and what's an area of growth. And so I'm just grateful to be here and be a part of this amazing team, that we support each other. And I'm grateful for the community who's embraced me, who check on me to make sure that everything is going well, that are always willing to give advice or lend a helping hand. So it's been a long year, but I think I'm excited about next year and what we've been able to accomplish. Sometimes people want to see more, but we have to lay a strong foundation. If we don't have a strong foundation, then the building will collapse. So this year has really been about this strong foundation, understanding these terms, what they mean, and how they are the foundation for the work that we are doing here in the district. So thank you for letting me share a little bit, and I look forward to what we're going to accomplish together next year.
Thank you, Shawana. Again, I don't know if you were on when I gave you credit for the glow and grow. So just to your point about you grow from your mistakes, I'm acknowledging, trying to use that language here too. So we're glowing, I think, in terms of this next topic, which is again, another thing that happened this year. It's hard to believe all this happened, but we opened a new middle school, and I love this picture. I don't think I'd seen it before, but it's on our website. So that's among the accomplishment of simply opening a building a new building, where it was located, and getting that up and running. I just thought, as I was thinking through some of the data, what that normal transition looks like and what happened this year. When you talk about the shifts that occurred, typically we see, fifth graders to middle school, eighth graders to high school, approximately 1,300 students. This year we had approximately 2,500 students that moved from one building to another. That doesn't include new enrollments or anything, new kindergartners, anything. It's just the students that are here and moving to a new school. So that's 1,000 plus more students this year than normal that transition, as well as the number of staff that transitioned in that same year. So again, when I go back to that pandemic piece, and then the transitions and the nature, the extent to which that has an impact on a large part of our community, I think it's worth noting, and that we did that. We invested in the communication ahead of time, and did a lot of work to prepare for that. Nonetheless, it still was a tremendous amount of work and flexibility that was exercised by both students, families, and staff to accomplish that. That I think, again, we something happens, and sometimes we don't get enough time to reflect and really honor that work that at every individual level took some commitment to do this and see where we are today. So I'm going to highlight a few things that I'd invite Alexis or Jen to jump in as well, because I took it from some of the work that was presented at Curriculum Committee of the Board meetings this year. I think it's so exciting to think not only did we move everyone, but we also we're reimagining the way in which we would deliver instruction in new and creative ways, and elevate the vision in the practice of the strategic plan. So you see things like problem-based learning at the elementary level. I thought some of the things that were important to call out are the focus on authentic community connections. Like, how do we get our students to think about their own community and their agency within it? The STEM pathway and the new special that we offer for all students across the elementary get access to STEM as a special program. And I loved the idea, or the reminder during the presentation when we were highlighting that particular special this spring, is the connection to the habits of mind, and that we haven't lost that work that we invested in. And it's so critical at this time, in my mind, relative to that recovery model, is what are the things that we're doing that are habits that are good for learners and good for just being able to navigate society. So I love that we are intentional about those connections. And I think that's important to remember, because it's intended to be embedded. It's not a thing that sits over here. As we do habits of mind, just as a lesson, it becomes embedded in all of the work that we do. And you can see a team of teachers, again, in recognition of Teacher Appreciation Week. Certainly none of this gets done at the high level that it does without their hard work directly with students and with each other. So I'm going to jump into the 5-8, unless Jen or Alexis wanted to. I'll keep moving. The 5-8, again, I just picked a couple highlights that were recently presented. The idea of the integrated block and the teaming approach that we're being very intentional about at the middle school level, so that it provides opportunities for these sort of real world, real life understandings of science. I love the connection to baking and chemistry and the doing of that work and in a classroom environment, and the way that we're thinking about how those things integrate and doing it with intentionality. I think that not only it creates efficiencies, but it also creates more sticky moments. I like to call, I think that's a Chris Hall term, is that you learn something because you feel it, you do it, and you understand it at a different level, and therefore it becomes sticky, and you can then use it in application in other places. I also loved the idea that this teaming approach allows for in the moment conversations that are connected to restorative work, responsive team meetings. In this case, there was a situation that the whole team could process through art, through poetry, through just an ability to process it in a way that was, I think, built on the science of relationships. And I think that's an important aspect of what we're trying to offer at the middle school level, beyond just here are your curricular offerings. How are we ensuring that our students are being trained to not only just enter to learn, but to go forth to serve, and in what ways can they do that better? These are some of the other new items. I think we've always done them in places throughout the middle school experience, but being more intentional about these particular touch points and skills across each grade band. I'm particularly excited about the leadership opportunities, and I know that's kind of blurry, but I love the concept of at each grade level, you're elevating your understanding of leadership from like a more self-reflective piece to like, how do you actually become an advocate for yourself and for your others and for your community as a leader. And I just think that's such a critical skill, and what a great time to learn that skill with support at the middle level, because high school is a lot about opportunities for leadership, but now having a curriculum that gives students the tools and the confidence to go after those leadership opportunities in high school, I think is even, it's going to set up more of our students for success and access to those opportunities in high school. The next two, because I can't, I'm sorry, Alexis, go ahead.
No, I just, yeah, because I'm sorry, I just wanted to jump in for a second. I wanted to
no.
And you did such a wonderful job presenting all of what we did as a highlight. So I wanted to just thank you for that. And I don't want to speak for Jen, but I have to say that there's a lot of work put into reimagining the K-8 experience over the last 3 years to make it be what it is today. But it's been a lot this year that we've had from a transitional standpoint. And I think that when we went to put together the presentation, we were really proud of what was accomplished in the buildings, remembering that this is a 5-year process. So, the picture that we had was like the tree that grows, and we were planting the seed this year. I think we did even better than planting the seed. And so we're proud of what our buildings have been able to accomplish K-8 with all these new curricular initiatives, and thinking about all the new students that came in and a brand new building on top of all that. We're really excited about where we're going to head, but I just want to shout out to all the people that did a ton of hard work to make this happen, because when you really look back and you think about what we were able to accomplish, it's pretty amazing what's happened. So you did a great job summarizing all that, but I just wanted to throw that in there as well. Thanks.
No, thank you. And I know I'm just picking out some highlights that since I got to create this presentation, I just got I got to pick what topics I was going to cover, but there's so many great examples that I could have used and pick from, but it is certainly inspiring. I mean, I think that's why we have to talk about the things that do glow, because it does give us that inspiration to say, like, yeah, let's reflect on that so that we can find that energy and opportunity to continue to do this work at a higher level. So again, I have to stick in some policy work. It wouldn't be a Megan Shafer presentation without that. So another thing that we had new this year was common handbooks across K-8. And that work was an effort to create some consistencies, knowing that this is version 1, and that we can continue to build and refine that. It was, we talked about ways in which policy becomes, I'll use the term again, like sticky. How do people know what the policy is, what the rules are? It's having language that is more accessible, that might be in a handbook, that might be in posters, that may be in reminders that happen or that are issued by principals, that may be shared by teachers, et cetera. So there's a lot of different ways that we want to make sure that the board's expectations around how we run our district, what the rules are for our community are known. So again, there's a variety of ways that we do that. And then, as I said, there was a shift to a number of different types of handbooks to a more unified approach across K-8, which is exciting. And then I've oriented people to it before, but if you haven't checked it out, I still encourage people to check it out for the first time. There's information that's general information about the district, things such as our commitment to diversity, equity, inclusivity, and belonging work, restorative practices. What are they? What are some questions that we ask when we do a restorative work, so parents and guardians also know that those are questions that they can be using at home too, or together with us. And then some expectations, gift policies, etc. There's information in there about reporting, which I've touched on already. Some general information about their individual schools. So it's individualized to some degree for each school building. Quick reference numbers, for example, being unique to each school. And I lost my transition slide. So that is, again, just a highlight of some of the work we did in trying to make policy work better and be more accessible to students and families. The other thing on the policy side, we had the opportunity this year to move forward with a student voter engagement policy, and that was a collaborative effort with students and staff and our board policy committee. So that was super enjoyable work that I got to do with students. We talked about the process. We talked about how we write a policy, what an administrative regulation is. So they get to work through that development process with us. And ultimately, we did pass that student voter engagement policy in January. So that was exciting work and certainly reflected student voice in that engagement. The other work that the policy committee has been committed to, as well as a number of other I wouldn't say a number of other committees, but certainly work that's been shared amongst other committees, and the wellness committee in particular, and the committee that helped write this was we've had obviously a lot of conversations. I mean, I would say that they started before the pandemic, but certainly have escalated since the pandemic, and concerns about student wellness. And one of the things that we noticed about our policy is that it was a pretty compliance-driven document, meaning that it touched on standards that were nutrition standards, physical education standards, and that it really didn't reflect a very holistic approach to wellness, which is more what we did in practice. So this year, connected to some other efforts like Healthy Start Times, which I'll talk about in a minute, was we were motivated and certainly saw a need to align our policy with our practices and the vision of student wellness, again, to be more holistic. So that is work that some people jealous about you out. We're very committed to ensuring that we were setting that vision statement and identifying the different dimensions of wellness for students. So This is moving forward for adoption, and we are still working on refining that administrative regulation. But one of the things that I think we can be proud of is we found, as we did some research around this, looking for examples across the state or even across the country, that there weren't a lot of robust K-12 examples of this type of policy. And so sort of like the equity policy and the TGD policy, we found ourselves a little bit on the front lines, not in front. I wouldn't claim that, but closer to the front lines. And so we relied on some outside resources. And as I said all along, I think we will continue to revisit this as we refine and other agencies provide maybe better articulated or more evidence-based ideas around student wellness that we can capitalize on when it's done. But I think it's a good place to start, because I think it much better reflects our goals with how we reflect student wellness and the intent to address that as a district. The other policy that we've talked about a lot this year is the student rights and responsibilities. And reason that Bitmoji is there is because I think we're going to continue to examine that, particularly around the use of technology. I'm going to talk a little bit more about recent events in a few minutes, but one of the challenges we have is that a lot of things can be true at once. And when they're all true at once, it's hard to do all of those things. And the example is, a desire on one hand to ban devices, like personal devices in schools, because of the disruption, because of the distraction, because of the research that suggests that that is, harmful to everyone, but to students in particular, and balancing that with the safety piece of it, that parents feel that is something that's important that their child have with them, not just for during the school day, but I need to know where my child is after school. I need to be able to connect with my child because they walk home, and I want them to have a phone for that purpose. So there's a lot of different dimensions to this, and my sense is that we're not looking to do a total ban here, but we also know it's very real and very concerning how much time we're spending addressing issues with devices in our school environment, and not just devices in our school environment and things that happen during the school day, but happen at any point in time, over the weekend, at night, etc. So not that really has anything to do with devices being in the building or not, but that's the reality of what we're being sort of tasked to solve in this moment. And so I think that we need to continue to have dialogue about how do we do this better, not just as a school district, but as a community, for the sake of our children. So that leads into what might be on some people's minds and in recent events involving texting, threats, racist language, hate speech, etc. This is something I'm going to share that I shared at the Equity and Anti-Racism Committee meeting, because I think what I would like to do, if nothing else, is to just build some understandings around how we process situations like this, because I know it can be very frustrating in the moment to try to do that from all perspectives, right? It's not helpful for me to tell you that we did these things when it's a real feeling of fear that you're feeling in that moment, and you want and people need that to be validated too. So in these moments where I can try to share and enlighten all of us to, like, here's what we do. We can, I think we're better positioned to ask questions and get better information through these types of opportunities. So I'm going to take it now. One of the things that I think, again, in terms of common understandings is having a common language. Bias incident is something that we hear that term used, and I'm intentional about using it here because I think I'm intending it to mean encompassing events like bullying, harassment, intimidation that are directed at a member or an individual or member of a group based on race, color, ethnicity, nationality, religion, etc. And what I also want to call it is sometimes a bias incident, according to our own policy, can be something that is intentional or unintentional. So there's explicit and there's implicit bias situations, and I think it's important to call attention to that too, because both of those happen. Also, transparency is something that I think, in terms of what we're trying to do is be transparent and be able to share information, and certainly a very generic definition, dictionary definition of being free from pretense of deceit and readily understood. And the way I'm translating it is trying to be open and honest about our work. And then one other, I think, term that sometimes gets that tends to have different meanings is zero tolerance. And zero tolerance has long kind of stood for the idea that a certain type of misbehavior or certain types of misbehavior result in a consequence such as suspension or expulsion. No questions asked. Like, there's zero tolerance. This thing happens, then these are the outcomes. We don't really have a zero tolerance policy here. What we don't tolerate is hate speech, bullying. So there's a distinction between when we say zero tolerance and what we don't tolerate here. And I think it's important because sometimes that gets confused. And sometimes it doesn't mean we don't suspend students here in the district. That does happen. But what we're mindful of is sometimes with zero tolerance policies, and the flip side of it is that there's research that shows that it often results in disparities in discipline. So there's a disparate impact in terms of using that type of policy or approach to spur discipline. And nor does it really typically yield benefit in terms of school climate, changes in school climate. So how do we approach that differently? So again, just to say that this piece is really to talk about the communication and the way we process an incident, but we always want people to feel comfortable reporting situations to us. As I encouraged people last night, if you have a concern, one of the things that in all of this that for me is a continuing bright spot is that these issues are getting reported so that we can do something. That is critical. And as scary as it is, it's to me reading that we know and that we can do something about it, as opposed to not knowing and assuming it's not happening, because it is happening. It's happening here. It's happening elsewhere. And I think that's the reality that we're faced with. And again, I'm grateful for those that came forward so that we can address these situations. So one of the framings I wanted to share in terms of how we share information and what information we can share is this idea. And Cheryl, you helped inspire me with this graphic around the idea of we can share and should share what our process looks like. What won't happen though is that we won't ever be able to share all of the facts of a situation. I say that with the caveat that absent some emergency circumstances, which the police would be involved, we might be able to share more details than we normally would. But in large part, this law, FERPA, Family Education Rights and Privacy Act, that's been on the books for a long time, prevents us from sharing information such as student name, discipline history, or discipline, whether a student has an IEP or a 504, or their race or their gender, their evaluation status, or any information, almost any information about a student that would be considered a student record. So whether we like it or not, that is the law, and it has been the law for a long time. And I think some of the why behind that is so that students have a right to be a child and make mistakes and do the things that children do and learn from their mistakes and grow and not be judged or judged forever based on a grade that they got or a classification they may have been given as a result of some test. So all of those things are really important and a value of not just the district, but for the country. So that is a little bit of a limitation in terms of when it feels like sometimes we're not completely transparent. That is a limitation, a real limitation for us. But what I also wanted to share is sometimes in terms of communication that we're able to provide, we don't necessarily, we like to know as much information as we can so we can accurately share what we do know. And so when we think about breaking down an incident, for example, there's just initial awareness, an awareness that an incident has occurred as a first step. We might get that from any source. We may hear it, it may be a rumor, it may be someone that, thought they heard something or something we need to look into. I mean, it's just the awareness that something has happened. That initial investigation is usually trying to gather, is this real? Did something happen? Is there something more here that we need to look into? And is it us, or is it the police, or did it happen outside? Like who should be responsible for taking the next step? And then we continue our investigation if it is our responsibility to do that, or if it's deemed something that's happened on our site that involves our property or our students or our staff, and we continue that investigation. But our initial focus is always, first and foremost, is the school safe? Are students safe? Are staff safe? So the investigation is always going to start with the safety piece, and that's the urgency to that investigatory piece. So it's, while we would communicate out if it was a risk to safety for others, our first step is making sure that the environment is safe or the individuals involved are safe. And then you can go from there and identify the scope of the issue and then complete the investigation. And at each point throughout that process, there's a question of, do we need to communicate? And typically it's, is there a safety concern? Is there a need to know, because we're hearing that it's out in the community and we need to clarify some information or at least confirm that we're aware of the situation. And then, continue our investigation. So it's routinely throughout the process that we're considering what do we share and when do we share it. And I think I'd like to use an example. This is not a real example, but just to put some more meaning behind these words, I think it's helpful. So it maybe makes more sense. In that step one, that awareness of a situation, I'm going to use the example of on 4:30 on a Friday afternoon, a student reports to an adult on the school campus that there was a fight involving students on school property, and there may have been a knife. So I'm going to continue to make some assumptions that the adult in this story was a staff member who then shared it with the principal. So it's about 5 o'clock on a Friday night. We just heard this. We have no names. We don't know where it happened exactly, other than it was on school property. And we likely, because there's mention of a knife, we're going to take the step of notifying the police. Now, again, we don't have much to work from other than to let them know that the same information that we know at this point, which is not much information. Now, the question is, do we share that information out to the community? but we don't even know if it happened. We only have a report with a this may have happened and no names associated with it. So it's probably not likely that we're going to report it out, but we have shared it with the police. And we continue our investigation and try to continue investigation and look at some video, try to pull some video footage. But it's not until the next day, Saturday, that the principal receives a message from someone in the community that said, hey, I heard about this situation and this student, I believe this student had a knife, and they give a name to the principal. And also say that they believe that the reason there was a fight was there was a racial slur that was used. So on Saturday, we now have a name identified with that situation that we can then share with the police, because we don't have access to the students. We don't execute search warrants. We don't follow up on the weekends in person the way the police can, if that's necessary. So they continue that investigation. At the same time, we are trying to gather information internally with our team. Okay, we know this student. We reach out to that family and say, can you tell me more? Because what we're trying to do is assess the safety of the school for Monday morning. Is that student able to return? What is our plan? Are there any other individuals involved we need to be aware of? So, again, making some assumptions that we can make those connections over the weekend. We identify 3 potential students that we have concerns about that may have been directly involved in a fight, and say, we need you to stay home, including the person that was alleged to have a head wound. We need you to stay home on Monday morning. We'll call you in when we're ready to do an interview. So at that point, we've established to the best of our ability who's directly involved, and that there's no safety risk to opening school on Monday. Even if there wasn't one to begin with, we know we've identified some students that need, sort of a specialized interview situation. So on Monday, we line up to start interviewing students. On Monday morning, we begin those interviews. Those 3 interviews identify witnesses, and by noon, we've now interviewed 10 other students and let their families know that we've interviewed them about this situation that happened on Friday afternoon. So again, question mark about who needs to know. There was not a safety risk. The police had already told us there's no safety risk here that they've based on their interviews. And so we've again taken, this takes us to Monday afternoon, where we've completed that part of the investigation, and what we've concluded is, in fact, there was no knife. We have no evidence, none of the witnesses, no information that there was actually ever a knife. That started back on Friday when someone speculated there may have been a knife. So if we had communicated out earlier that there was a fight situation with a knife, that wouldn't have been true. And so we would need to go back and share that information. Now, I'm not saying that if there had been a lot of concern in the community about that, we wouldn't have otherwise communicated something like we are aware of this situation. But assuming that that didn't happen, there was really no need to communicate in that moment. The other thing that we conclude from that investigation is that there was an allegation that there was a racial slur. That the outcome of that investigation determined that all of the students that were involved were of the same race. So at that point in time, the question mark is that there really wasn't a fight. There really wasn't a knife. There was a verbal altercation among students of the same race. And so again, to that question mark of what do we need to communicate outward versus what do we need to make sure we're communicating inward, and the support that we need to be providing to students who are involved. If there are any consequences that are appropriate, that those are issued, and managing again the immediacy of the situation, which is that universe of students who were originally involved. So I wanted to share that as a relatively easy example, but one that you can see if you added different variables in, that could get much more complicated, and why we need to stay focused, at least initially, on the identified aggressors, and use that term, and the identified victims, so that we can try to get the complete story and ensure safety first and foremost. So I appreciate you allowing me to go through that again here today while I had the opportunity. But I think it's on a lot of people's minds, and it relates to some of these issues that are coming out, so that we can try to be as clear as we can be about our process. And then the other thing, on the flip side, there are things that we can, should, and do share, which are incidents that are an imminent threat to school safety or security, incidents that require clarification. So as soon as I use, yesterday as an example, when we became aware that there was more knowledge about the situational awareness of the situation, we worked hard to immediately get out a communication acknowledging the situation and acknowledging that we were in the process of working with the police and that the environment was safe. Even though we hadn't really gotten to a point where we were completely ready to communicate, we knew that it was necessary in that moment to go ahead and send that message. We can also be transparent about the laws, policies, and procedures that we follow. And we can convey information about incidents and trends and measures taken to address concerns. So we're trying to frame, moving forward, maybe a different approach to communication, so that parents get some regular understandings and updates, that we just frame it a little bit differently in our messaging to say, these are things that we're seeing over time, and you need to be aware of them too, and call attention to those, as opposed to individualized incidents, which would still do. But I think sometimes, to remind folks that the reason we talk about, reminding families to check what their teens are doing on social media, is because that probably has been an issue that we've been seeing in our schools. So just being more clear about the connections of our recommendations and the trends that we're seeing in schools, something I think we can work on as well. And so I'm going to round these out. Final few topics here: healthy start times and for their kindergarten. We talked about healthy start times last night. They are going to be changing in 2024, and we'll start that campaign so everyone remembers that that's happening in 2024 and gets ready for that. We're doing that for a lot of reasons, but as we talked about student wellness, this is a component of trying to achieve better sleep patterns, better sleep times, or optimizing opportunities for sleep for our adolescent students is the objective here. And probably everyone on this presentation has seen this before. These are our current times, and they are changing for 24-25, subject to some potential minor modifications for 24-25. And the difference that we're seeing here is that middle school will be the first to arrive, followed by high school and elementary school. This creates some shifts in the length of the school day, also start and end times for each level that are reflected here. What we're talking about right now is some of the requested modifications, including trying to move back that end of the school day for elementary, so it's not after the 4 o'clock hour, which we're working on. That may mean some slight adjustment to middle school, but we're not there yet. It was just a variable that we're looking at. Also, what options can we offer for the full school? Childcare support for elementary families. Should that adjustment mean, a 20-minute later start time for elementary? Is there a way we can support families with that adjustment? So we're looking at that. I presented last night on an update on those issues, as well as ensuring that our staff have voice and agency in this change, because it does have an impact, not just on families, but on our staff as well. And certainly in a moment where all of this transition and all of the work that we're doing. We value staff retention and want to take steps that are consistent with that goal. Meaning, if there are opportunities for staff to move to another building because it would better suit their schedule or needs, we will try to accommodate that. And then this is just at a glance. The full day kindergarten planning is well underway. That's again also slated to begin in 24-25. A lot of work has gone into this today, and Alexis, or those of you if you wanted to jump in, but the idea, I just wanted to make sure everyone was aware of that. Another big project for this year, and something that will be, we believe, subject to, we're working through all the budget pieces right now, will be ready for implementation in 24-25. That is the expectation of the board, and that's the goal we're working towards. Moving, the other hot topic that comes up a lot is the fields, which has been a priority item for us, both for Blackrock and for the lights on Arnold Field. Sarah Stout, together with some other supporters, presented a little bit more of the why do we need fields, not necessarily about Oakville specifically, but the needs associated with Blackrock and why the property known as Oakville was purchased at the same time, because we knew we needed the field space to support the athletic and extracurricular opportunities that we wanted to offer for students, and not just those that we had already in our repertoire, but also the extension or expansion of intramural opportunities, knowing that we would have both 5th and 6th grade graders in our middle school buildings. That was there was a lot of discussion about how do we expand those opportunities again for healthy opportunities for students to be together, connected, and doing things outside of the school day leads to greater connections with school, and also maybe greater disconnection from devices. And so some of those are ongoing objectives for us. And again, the idea behind, we don't want this to be a trees versus kids conversation. It's about what are we doing for kids in meeting their needs and the programs that we want to offer for them. So again, we wanted to make sure that we shared out that there is still an ongoing need to support Blackrock and in terms of fields. And we also know that there's a lot of concern about using the property known as Oakville for that purpose, and which is why the board and the administration have been exploring other opportunities such as polo fields and elsewhere to see whether there are opportunities beyond that the property that we currently own for those field purposes. So that work is ongoing, but I think it's important to acknowledge that I think again all things can be true. We want a healthy environment, but we also want opportunities for kids that are accessible to the schools that we build. So it's work that is ongoing for us. So through all of those, we can go back and we want to deep dive into fields and then sort of planning for the future. Given all of those transitions, given that the recovery status that we're in, and some of these other things such as the labor market and school bus drivers and the number of individuals that are going into the profession right now. It's not just about our ability to attract is challenged like everyone right now. And what we want to do is from a recruitment standpoint, continue to be a desirable destination for staff, because that staff is what makes this whole operation work. And staff that feel valued and motivated and supported is going to result in better outcomes for students. And so I think we just want to make sure collectively as an organization and as a community that we're thinking about that piece of it as well. And certainly the wellness piece for students is critical to keep in mind. And so how do we do this? And I think that involves some partnerships, the continued work that we've been doing around MTSS and folding in intention around the PBIS behavior work, social emotional learning, and again, partnering with some other institutions such as Challenge Success. I mentioned it last night. I think that student voice piece is really critical, so that we're measuring how we're doing in those areas from that lens. And we really have appreciated the Challenge Success model before, because I think it's given us some really good direction previously around things such as homework and how that impacts wellness and sleep and all of those things. So I use that as an example. We're not committed to any of these particular items other than MTSS and our strategic plan. But I think we want to continue to build on that, but also balancing that recovery piece and that acknowledgement of recovery, but also we need to move forward thinking about where are our students at. Even pre-pandemic, we weren't talking as much about artificial intelligence. We weren't talking as much about social media and the impact of that. We weren't talking as much about mental health. We're doing that a lot more now, and I can't say, and I don't know the science is that there's a direct correlation between that and the pandemic. I just know that what we were talking about before the pandemic is different than what we're talking about now, and I think we need to, pay attention to that and reset our thinking around that. And what I think I'm most excited about is the opportunity to refresh the strategic plan. I think there's a lot of the plan that is something that will continue for us as a vision statement, but they're again in line with some of the things I just mentioned. I think there's an opportunity for us to look at that again and get some new excitement around where we can go from here. Since it's been almost 10 years since it was originally drafted, it will be exciting to go through that process of refreshing. And so it's from a prior presentation, but that is my ending thought for you all. Hopefully you're still with me, and if not, it's recorded so you can go back and pick up where you may have missed something.
Thank you, Megan. That was very insightful and detailed, and I think it will be perfect for us to have that recorded so that people can get all of their questions answered. And speaking of questions, I've got a couple in the chat, but I'm also going to invite people to use your raise hand function so you can ask your question. One question that I know people were thinking about is you spoke about the need to have dialogue between the admin and the community around the issue of cell phones and much more, of course. Do you have a plan on how and when this will happen?
So part of the plan that we started talking about at the board level, which is an opportunity to bridge with the community, is having a potential subcommittee of our wellness committee. We do like our committees around here, to start to work through identifying the ways in which we can do some engagement around this, but also help us move forward, because I do think figuring out or bringing a representative committee together under the wellness committee, to me, and I think in that moment at the board level made sense, because we're seeing this as a health issue, a mental health issue, and I think it's in line with discussions we've already had at the wellness committee. And so if we can use that as a starting point, we can bring additional individuals into that work, that they don't necessarily need to be a part of the committee right now, but we can start there and begin the thinking about how can we make this, you know, how can we create a framework for more dialogue around this issue? So that was where we were going to start, and I think, like I said, there's all these things can be through, and it's important that we figure out where the community, what the relative values of it of the issue are, right, so we can try to manage it better in this basically.
Thank you. I know several parents throughout the year in middle school, especially the 5th and 6th grade parents, were asking for some sort of survey to find out how the 5th grade transition has gone. I know we were talking about from a curricular standpoint, but perhaps there's some anecdotal opportunities you could share on the social emotional and how that's been going for 5th and 6th, all being in there with 7th and 8th.
Yeah. I definitely heard that too. I don't know, Alexis, if you wanted to jump in, and we had some conversation about that.
I mean, we've talked about doing a quick check belonging survey, honestly, soon with our students. Nothing that's extensive, but at least gives us an idea at the middle level, the 3 different middle schools, and not just for 5th grade, but for 5th, 6th, 7th, and 8th grade students, just to give us a check-in that we could use to talk about how is our sense of belonging in the building. Do students feel connected with an adult, and so forth, and then use that as a beginning gauge for us to then look for growth next year, right? So make some adjustments based on that, and then look for growth next year. So we are having conversations about doing something in like an INE period. That would be honestly like a 5-minute survey for students, but just to give us an understanding of where our students stand right now at the middle level. You know, Ms. Shafer talked about a more extensive survey that we would want to do next year. We've also talked with UPenn about doing a survey at the middle level with Mrs. James Cole as well. And so we have some of those things sitting out there that we know we'll have in place, but at least for this year, we wanted to just get a quick check gauge of where our students at. So that's the one thing that we have on the horizon for this year as an internal measure for us to be able to grow. You know, I've been in the buildings and talked with the principals, and I've talked with teachers, and from a transitional standpoint, I think we feel pretty good about our students transitioning to the middle school over time, right? Like, so you know how that happens because it's been a year now. So as we progress through the year, I think we feel pretty good about it in a general sense for all grades. I know that our middle school administrators, our middle school teachers love having 5th grade in the building. They just bring a whole different vibe into the schools, and you know, they love being there, and they love being in school, and that even from a staff perspective has really put some life into the buildings. We've been thoughtful about where we have placed our students in every one of the buildings, so that, you know, at BC our 5th graders are on that 3rd top floor, just to make sure that there's a transitional effort within the building. So I would say, I think we feel good about it. Do we have more to look at and evaluate and work on? Absolutely, yes. But we're hoping to do that quick survey to give us at least some data point prior to the end of the year.
Great, thanks. Okay, I'm still looking for hands raised. If anyone has a question they want to ask. I see another question in the chat, which you can probably see too. Regarding student voice, the voter policy is a great example, but was created by one district group of students. How else is student voice happening with intentionality besides the videos that were just made? Giving specific examples would again go a long way for building trust among the community that student voice is not just words. The students had an opportunity to participate in the equity student survey. Were they informed of the results? Do they know that their voices are informing action?
I mean, I think I can answer it in a few different ways, and I probably didn't highlight this enough, but I know that is certainly something that we have been talking about a lot and spending a lot of time thinking about how do we, you know, continue to ensure that we're elevating student voice. And I do, you know, I think just like this question suggests, like student voice isn't a monolith. Like sometimes we say it that way, like student voice, and they're all going to think this way or say this thing. We know that that's not true. So how do we ensure that when we're talking about student voice and decision making, that it really is representative or reflective of the diversity of student voice within an organization? And I also think sometimes when we talk about student voice, it might be one of those things we try to define collectively a little bit better, because there's within the strategic plan, there's a specific pathway titled student driven schools. And I was at the table when that name came up by a student that led us to having a pathway called student driven schools, because look, there was a lot of fear. I remember that table, I'm like, really, are we going to say student driven schools? We want them to drive? Like that really took some processing. Like, are we ready for that? Is that the word we want to use? And after we've had a lot of dialogue, which is why I'm really excited to go back to like our, talking about this strategic visioning again, but it really settled with us. And it was like, that is exactly what we mean when we talk about student-driven schools, and how are all the ways that we identify voice at all levels. So what does voice look like in the classroom? What does agency look like in the classroom? What does voice and agency look like at a building level? What are examples of that? From opportunities. I hear this all the time, and I've seen it in action at the high school level. The clubs are largely student-led. I mean, staff play a very much a supporting role in a lot of those clubs. And I also hear through the questions though, is like, but that's not everyone. And I think that's continues to be our work. It's like, where aren't we maybe meeting students where they are to ensure that their voice is elevated? And I think that's true, not just for students, but community as well. So I think, like I said, when we talk about student voice, I want to try to be careful about what I'm talking about when I respond to that, because I think in some of the examples I gave around the leadership skills, the engagement in problem-based learning and the collaborative approach and the habits of mind, and all of those things that are building blocks for empowering students and creating agency and voice as they move through our system, ideally, I think are aligned to do those things. But again, going back and reflecting on that, taking inventory of that, doing like the surveys so that students know not just that we're taking the surveys, but also reflecting back to them what we learned is really important. And I agree with those points as well that you've made. So I think again, it's all these things can be true. We can be doing a lot of good work around student voice, but we can also do more. And I think that's what we want to work on.
Can I jump in on that
Of
too?
course.
Yeah, so, and I know I was reading the question by Ms. Osler, Jill, my BFF, in the comments. And I know that you were on the call and we talked about this during the anti-equity, anti-racism committee meeting, and we were deliberate. And one of the things I did, I went back, as Megan shared, with looking at it from the strategic plan and looking at student agency and how is it defined by the Department of Education? How is it defined by PDE, to really give that grounding of what it is and how sometimes our perceptions of student voice may be different from student perceptions, sharing when students have that agency in their classrooms to pick and choose. That's student voice, and it comes in many ways, podcasts, and those videos, the video that we created, those students, we're still getting a lot of positive feedback from that, because they never said everything was great. What they said was, these are some areas that we need to work on. These are some things that's happening. And for example, Megan, Ms. Shafer mentioned the clubs. One of the students shared, some of this is we need to do better. We need to go out and recruit other students and share how we're excited about the clubs to get other people to join. So part of this is also about empowering students to get more students to be involved. Sometimes when our students transfer in, they don't know who they may be able to connect with. So encouraging those, that's still a part of student voice and student agency. So coming up with this, again, this common understanding and listening to our students, but listening to them doesn't always mean that we're always going to agree and we're going to always make the decisions that they want us to make. It means that we're sitting at the table with them, that we're dialoguing, we're getting those points from them so that we can make decisions. And I think sometimes when you're out and you're coming in, I guess I have a different outlook on what student voice looks like because I'm in the buildings, and I know that sometimes parents can't and community members can't get in there to see it. When students are like, you know, in a couple of weeks, they have Sage Wellness coming in. Those things, those activities are going to be led by students. I'm meeting with someone at the high school today to talk about the Embrace program, where students are going to lead it. That's student voice. And I always, you know, part of the presentation that I gave the other night was on the negative bias, right? Making sure that we don't cancel out the good to say that, you know, as we're asking questions, and I'm not saying you did that, Jill, so I'm not saying it because I did see your other note, but making sure that we honor what the children are doing, what our students are doing, honoring, and then it's this dialogue between the community and the administrators, and I think we're getting there. We're not perfect. We're on the road to success, right? We may be on a little gravel part, but I think we're getting close to the paved part. That gives me excitement when students reach out and say, I want you to be a part of it. Students who are just learning who I am, because we're getting into the building. So if you hear that little bit of excitement, it's because the students are reaching out and they're sharing what it is. It's not perfect, but we're growing, we're getting there, right? And so honoring, I was here for the part when they were on the policy, when the students just even educated them on how to do a policy, how to write a policy. That was in September, I think I joined it. And then October, I presented at an international conference and talked about what our kids were able to do at an international conference, that our students were working with the board and administrators to write a policy. They were blown away to hear what Lower Merion did with their students. So I just want to elevate that, you know, student voice. And then Dr. McGloin mentioned the belonging piece. We're going to work with the University of Pennsylvania to get a belonging survey so that, again, honoring their voice, seeing where we can partner, seeing where we can also guide, because it's almost a little bit, I don't want to say we're their parents, but like that guiding, like our kids come up with great things, but we're like, okay, well, maybe if we look at it like this, you know, just helping to inform decisions. So there's some great things, but student voice comes in so many ways. If I picked what I'm wearing today, that's student agency. I used to fight with my daughter every day about what she was wearing to school. I'm like, I want you to go where you can wear a uniform, because every day she was exercising her voice and her agency of what she felt like she was going to wear that day. So it's a great thing, but I do want to elevate those videos because I love how they framed it. It was like, no, it's not perfect. There's some glows, but these are opportunities for growth. And I think if we continue to do that, we're going to be so much better for it. I'm off my soapbox.
Thanks, Shawana. We've got 2 new parents, so I'm not sure who MR is, but MR, could you ask your question?
You do know who I am.
Oh, it's Monica. Hello.
Yes, sorry about that. I wanted to first thank Megan Shafer for a very thorough presentation. I appreciate that you touched upon all these various things going on, and yes, a lot has happened this year. I wanted to go back, however, to the K through 8 reimagined. I didn't notice any reimagining going on for the high school, like K through 8. It's fabulous what you've done in this leadership course or program in particular. Sounds fabulous, but part of me cannot help but look and see, what about 9 through 12, seeing as those are some very important years there.
I'll jump in first because I have a prepared response to that. And then Alexis or anyone else that wants to jump in. I don't say I'm prepared, but I think one of the things that upon reflection, I probably should have done a better job in this moment, is to honor work that is happening at the high school. We've focused a lot of attention this year on the K-8 transition out of necessity. And also because it was time to go and and take a deep dive into what we were doing and elevate those experiences aligned with the strategic plan. I think I do a disservice to the high school teams and staff that are doing really transformative work at the high school level. That may or may not be of interest, but things like borderless grading, like the work that is advanced just under the strategic plan that they've been doing and have been working on, over the years. And so I think what happened in this moment is we didn't have an opportunity to showcase some of that this year, which I know, based on some feedback we've gotten recently, something we want to certainly do next year and continue. Like, again, that opportunity to refresh the strategic plan also gives us an opportunity, K-12, to say, what do we need to focus on and what are things that are more in alignment with that vision piece. I think some of that work actually we did with the K-8. We did some of that rethinking around the strategic plan there already, but doing it with that intentionality around the refresh, I think it was, again, another opportunity to focus at the high school level, but also bring in and showcase some of the things that are already happening there. So that's, I think it's a little bit of, a communication
Is there anything like the leadership program in the works? I see it includes mindfulness-based stress reduction, growth mindset, school-based support, things like that, it seems are in a dire need in the high schools. Is there some systematic, intentional way that you're thinking of incorporating this into their experience?
Alexis, do you want to jump in?
Want me to chat? I'm happy to jump in. So we've had conversations with the high school. Honestly, it was a 3-year process to get us to where we were K-8. And it's not that we weren't paying attention at the high school as well, we were, but we were intentionally focused on restructuring our middle level, knowing that if we put a leadership course in, it may and most likely will have an impact on what happens at the high school, right? And so we've had conversations on what that might look like, be it a course or not a course, right? Because maybe it doesn't become a course there, but how does that impact? I'm sorry, as I'm talking, of course, my phone starts ringing. I apologize for that. The other conversation we've had with the department chairs, and they are interested in and brought it up as well, was about our integrated block, right? And that we have an integrated block in 7th and 8th grade that's either a STEM block or a humanities block, and the students will have that experience in either 7th or 8th grade. So one year they get STEM, the other year they get humanities. And you heard a couple examples of what that integrated block looks like. We're growing into that and anticipate and are sure that it's going to become more and more robust in the next couple of years. So the question becomes then, what happens, right, when we get to the high school level, and then how does that impact what our student experience should look like at the high school level? So those are the conversations we're starting to have now on the influence of what we've done at the middle level and what does that look like at the high school level. Doesn't always translate the same, right? Because there are definitely different boundaries at the high school level, different expectations at the high school level. And so what does it look like is more what we have to research and spend time on and not just jump into. I would say there's other things happening there though as well, right? So just because we don't have the integrated block or leadership, it doesn't mean that we're not trying different innovative things. Like I'll use standards-based grading as a good example of that. And that's almost like you do the assessment and then you go in and you relearn and you reteach so that you get to the point where you have mastery, which is really important, right? It's not just about, yes?
I'm not sure if I'm familiar with this. What are you talking about?
Standards-based grading is happening in some of our pockets of our schools, at the high school level and the middle school level, just as a prototype to see what it looks like. So physics at Harriton is doing it, for example, our world language department is using it as well. And it's based on the standards we want students to learn versus getting 100% on every single test, right? And so innovative, rethinking the way that we teach and learn for students. And that's examples of some things that we would have happening in pockets of our schools to see if it's something that we would want to replicate. Cumulative grading at the high school level actually started that way, right? And so 2 years ago, The high school went to cumulative grading, and so we don't have quarters anymore, right? It's quarterless grading, I think, is what Mrs. Shafer called it. But realistically, it's the grade continues the whole entire year, and you could retake or redo, right, throughout the year, because it's really based on your whole year's grade, not just by quarter. Interestingly enough, we're at the middle level right now talking about what does our report card look like and what does grading look like. And we've had a presentation for elementary and high school because their grading systems are way more innovative than we're doing at the middle level right now. So I think all three levels influence one another in different ways. High school as well, we're focused a lot on this year. What does our GPA look like? The weighted averages, electives. How do we get students to take something they may really be interested in, but they won't take because they're worried it's going to have an influence on their cumulative average. So what would it look like at the college if they were looking at our transcripts? That is our committee work that's happening at the high school level right now, because we really want students to have the ability to look at their interests versus what's going to count to get my GPA higher. So that's a lot of work that's happening right now at that level. It looks a little different clearly than what we have at the middle level, but still really important and impactful.
Is there something on the social emotional range going on in the high school that we may not be aware of?
Where that's happening, you would see in your I&E blocks. We have specific lessons that are happening, and also through developmental guidance lessons. That's where you're going to see the social emotional lens of instruction there.
Thanks. I'd like to fit
Thank
in
you.
one more question.
Thank you.
I appreciate the detailed steps of how situations are being handled by the administration. However, I was wondering how principals are restoring peace for the student community, since harm is done not just to those individuals involved, but others in the building.
That's definitely been a question on a lot of people's minds. I got that this morning. I was meeting with staff out at one of our buildings this morning. I think one of the things that we need to I'm sorry, I want to make sure I'm conveying this in the way that I intend to convey it is we talked a lot, and some people, the impression is that it's about addressing the individual that's causing the harm, that's where all of the energy is. That we talk about the threat assessment, we talk about the discipline, we talk about a consequence, we talk about what's happening there. And at the same time, what we want to do is build a more intentional framework around how do we support victims. So we talk like having an alignment with what we talk about as a threat assessment, which is an evidence-based, research-based tool, have a similar protocol that's consistent, referred to as a support assessment, which we've already built out. But I think where we're going to continue to expand it, just for consistency's sake, I'm not saying because I think principals are addressing it with their staff and their communities as they have and as they would typically convene, whether at a grade level assembly or through their staff messaging or through a Zoom meeting, which is an example that was used the other day just to connect with students and share a message of reassurance. So the idea is, again, not only expressing safety, but reassurance that we're keeping the community safe. So I go back to this support assessment protocol, which would be both at an individual level, but can be built out so there's some consistency in our framework around how do you do a support assessment at a classroom level? How do you do a support assessment at a building level? And what does a support assessment look like at a district level? These are all consistent with our prepare model that we follow, and that's like that crisis response framework that I referred to at the beginning of the presentation. But just doing it in a very a lower Merion organized way, I think would be beneficial for the organization and something that we will continue to work on again. So there's that consistency in practice, but also within a framework, you can do different things that could, there are different tools within a framework that could be used depending on the situation. So we don't want to be too prescriptive on what might work in any given situation, but make sure that everyone's aware of what the options are that are available to them. So,
Megan, I'd also like to highlight that in the most recent situation, I thought it was great that the counselors shared links that families could go to for ideas on how to start the discussion. I thought that was really useful. All right. I think that concludes our questions for this portion. We have it all on video so we can share it out and everyone in the district can learn from all of this knowledge. I appreciate everyone being here to answer our questions. Thank you for an exciting year. And we look forward to working with you again next year.
Thank you.
Everyone.